Imagine this vault, deep under Rome, just filled with centuries of secrets, things maybe nobody's seen. The whole idea of the Vatican Secret Archive. It's sparked so many myths, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's captured the imagination for generations. But it's more than just storage. It's a place where history was, let's say, actively managed, where powerful groups, societies, their stories ended up locked away.
Exactly. And that's what we want to dig into today. We're going beyond the conspiracies, the aliens and the Holy Grail stuff, to look at the real history hidden in those files.
Yeah, the documents the church chose to keep private, or secretum, as they called it.
Right. We want to understand why they kept things secret and how that secrecy actually shaped history. We've looked at articles, research reports, historical analyses, trying to piece together the story.
And the story really starts with Pope Paul V, back in 1612. Before him, things were apparently quite scattered, vulnerable.
So he formally set up the Archivum Secretum Vaticanum.
He did. And that word secretum, it's key. Back then, it didn't really mean secret, like we think of it today, all cloak and dagger. It meant private.
Ah, so private to the Pope. For his eyes and maybe his advisors?
Exactly. It was about papal governance, keeping records safe, but yes, also about protection, protecting them from the outside world, perhaps even from certain historical takes.
And the scale is just unbelievable. You mentioned 53 miles of shelving.
85 kilometers, yeah. It's vast. 35,000 volumes just in the catalog. And material going back to the 8th century. The oldest single parchment is from 809 CE.
Incredible. And for the first couple hundred years, completely off limits.
Totally closed. Pope Leo III started opening it up a bit in 1881, but only to certain Catholic scholars. Even now, getting access is incredibly difficult.
How difficult are we talking?
Well, you need to be a serious, qualified scholar, no journalists, no students really. You need academic credentials, a very specific research proposal they have to approve. Often a letter from a professor. And even if you get in, you can only ask for maybe 3, perhaps 5 specific documents a day.
So you can't just browse the shelves hoping to stumble on something?
Absolutely not. You have to know exactly what you're looking for. And no photos allowed. It all adds to the mystique. Plus, there's the bunker.
Right. The 2-story, fireproof, concrete vault underground. That sounds like something out of a movie.
It does, doesn't it? And all this secrecy, naturally, it's just fuel for conspiracy theories.
Oh, yeah. Aliens, hidden gospels, proof Jesus was married, the Ark of the Covenant.
Chronovisors, the Illuminati controlling things from the shadows, even, bizarrely, the world's biggest collection of pornography. People have imagined everything.
While those are, let's face it, mostly fantasy, the archive does hold genuinely sensitive stuff, real historical dynamite, and that mix is fascinating.
It really is, and that brings us to some of those hidden histories, especially concerning groups or societies whose fates were tied up in these documents. The Knights Templar are a classic example.
Ah, yes, the warrior monks. Hugely powerful, hugely wealthy.
And that wealth became their downfall. Philip IV of France owed them a fortune. So in 1307, he has them arrested, accuses them of heresy, blasphemy, pretty much everything under the sun.
Mostly trumped-up charges to get rid of his debt.
That's the strong suspicion, yes. Many Templars were tortured into confessing, burned at the stake. It was brutal.
And the archives hold the trial transcripts.
They do. And a crucial document, this enormous parchment, like 60 meters long, only made public in 2007.
60 meters, wow. What did it show?
It showed that Pope Clement V, he actually intended to pardon the Templars initially. He found the charges were largely baseless or extracted under torture.
So what happened?
Political pressure. Philip IV basically forced his hand. The Pope was sort of boxed in, and he eventually dissolved the order and condemned them.
That's incredible. It shows how secular power could just lean on the papacy.
Absolutely. It reveals how political expediency could directly influence church decisions and shape the historical record about a really powerful organization.
And it wasn't just big organizations. The archives are full of records about fighting heresy, right? The Inquisition.
Oh, yes. From the 13th century, Pope Gregory the Next set up a permanent papal inquisition. And they kept meticulous records, very detailed accounts of trials.
I read about the Malleus Maleficarum collection.
Yes, wicked evils. Hundreds of volumes detailing witch trials across Europe. Often, it was local healers, midwives, people accused based on, well, superstition and fear. These records show the church's own mindset at the time.
And they didn't just go after people, but books, too.
Definitely. There are papal bulls, those official decrees condemning specific books. Dante's Divine Comedy was on the list for a while. Copernicus's heliocentric theories.
How did they enforce that?
They had networks to try and intercept printed pages, cataloging banned works. It was a pretty comprehensive system of censorship, of trying to control ideas.
But did it always work?
Not entirely. You find interesting contradictions in the archives. Some banned books still circulated quietly. Some authors got away. Sometimes books popped up again under different titles.
And you mentioned finding little notes, like acts of resistance.
Yeah, sometimes in the margins of these official documents, you find notes that hint at disagreement, maybe someone trying to protect a work or an author. Little cracks in the system.
Then there are the letters, the ones that never got answered. That sounds heartbreaking.
It really is. Think about King Henry VIII's petition in 1530 asking for the annulment from Catherine of Aragon. It's apparently this massive document, 3 feet wide, signed by 81 nobles and clergy.
All pleading his case?
Yes. And Pope Clement VII refused, just said no. And that refusal, as you know, led directly to Henry breaking away, forming the Church of England. That single document is so iconic it's kept separately.
And the red ribbons on it. That's where red tape comes from.
That's the story, yeah. A literal example of bureaucratic process changing the world.
Galileo's another big one, isn't he? His trial records must be in there.
They are. He was warned in 1616, but then in 1633 he was formally tried and found vehemently suspected of heresy for pushing the idea that the earth revolved around the sun.
And the archives show the internal discussions. The fear.
You see the notes, the drafts, sometimes redacted letters. It clearly shows how threatened the church felt by ideas that challenged its core doctrines, its view of the cosmos.
It's pattern, isn't it? Resisting change.
Institutions often prioritize stability, you could say. And the archives are also filled with pleas that just met silence. Letters from queens desperate for holy relics for sick children, village healers trying to defend themselves against heresy accusations.
And during the wars.
Especially WWI and WWII. Letters from families in danger, particularly Jewish families, appealing to Pope Pius XII around 1942 for help, for intervention.
The response.
Often silence, or replies that were diplomatic but ultimately ineffective. Replies that came too softly, as some historians put it. Just countless stories of unanswered hope preserved forever.
Were some letters actively suppressed?
It seems so. Documents detailing abuses in seminaries, corruption, maybe dangerous confessions from within the church hierarchy itself. Some are heavily redacted, names blacked out, paragraphs obscured, deemed too sensitive.
Which leads us to the Vatican's relationships with, less savory political figures. Dictators.
Yes, the archives offer a complex, sometimes uncomfortable view of that. Take the Lateran Treaty with Mussolini in 1929.
That established Vatican City as an independent state, right? Solved the Roman question.
It did. But the drafts in the archives show the negotiations, the compromises, concerns about anti-church factions, warnings about atheist propaganda being allowed. And again, you see passages blacked out, names removed, clearly sensitive stuff.
And Hitler. The Reichskonkordat of 1933.
That was supposed to guarantee the rights of the church in Nazi Germany. But the archives show how quickly the Nazis used it purely for propaganda. Catholic newspapers were shut down anyway, priests arrested. The treaty offered little real protection.
What about Pope Pius XII during the war? His neutrality is still debated.
Intensely. The archives opened from his papacy show coded messages, intelligence reports, internal assessments of casualty figures. They also document clandestine efforts, often through networks of clergy, to get visas for persecuted Jews and others.
But he was publicly silent on the Holocaust for a long time.
He was. And Archbishop Pagano, the recent prefect of the archives, suggested Pius XII's post-war silence might have been linked to concerns about the political implications of supporting the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine.
So it's a picture of pragmatism. Balancing acts.
It seems to reveal a church constantly weighing its moral obligations against its own survival as an institution, often choosing, as Pagano implied, silence over outcry, diplomacy over denunciation. It's complex.
And perhaps one of the most surprising things you mentioned is this whole section for saints who weren't. Candidates who were denied.
Yes, an entire chamber, apparently. Stories deliberately kept out of the public eye, not suitable for veneration.
Like who? Could you give some examples?
Sure. There's mention of a 17th century priest from Naples whose case got shelved because of rumored links to a banned mystic group, or a Polish nun whose visions were seen as maybe encouraging disobedience.
So not fitting the mold.
Exactly. Or being politically inconvenient. Like a Spanish laywoman who opposed the Franco regime, her beatification was stalled for political reasons. Sometimes entire files were sealed. Like a bishop who spoke out against fascism, his writings deemed politically dangerous.
Wow. So sainthood wasn't just about holiness, but also about image control.
It seems that way. The archives hold these hidden truths that came up during the investigations. Maybe abuse allegations against someone seen as a martyr, or a diary from an African woman who founded a community, but her writings showed too much pride or ambition or had mystical visions that didn't fit the approved narrative.
Lies deemed worthy in private but unworthy in public. That's quite a phrase.
It sums it up well. It shows how the church carefully curated its saints, presenting a specific, often sanitized version of holiness.
So fast forward to today. Things are changing, right? Pope Francis renamed it the Vatican Apostolic Archive in 2019. Drop the secret.
He did. Partly to get away from that modern hidden meaning of secretum, make it sound more open, maybe encourage transparency, perhaps even donations too. There's a foundation in the U.S. now, Treasures of History.
Is it actually more open? Are they digitizing things?
They are making efforts. There's a project called In-Codis Ratio, using AI to transcribe medieval documents, apparently with really high accuracy, like 96%.
That sounds promising.
It is, but it's a monumental task. Only a tiny fraction is online so far. Full digital access is still a long, long way off. And the pressure for more access keeps growing.
From who?
Families of war victims, survivors of abuse looking for records, human rights groups. They all want more transparency.
Have there been leaks? Cracks in the walls?
There have been occasional leaks, yes. Whistleblowers releasing documents about secret deals or misconduct. The Vatican usually investigates the leak itself, but also tends to tighten controls afterwards.
And Archbishop Pagano, the prefect who just retired after decades, he's been talking more openly.
He has, offering insights into things like Pius XII's mindset, and also expressing some frustration with, say, sainthood cases that didn't use the archives properly, maybe rushed through without full historical context. His perspective is quite revealing.
It really raises that fundamental question, doesn't it? How does an institution like this balance preserving its history with the demands for transparency, especially when that history is uncomfortable or damaging?
It's the central tension. This archive isn't just old paper. It's a living record of power, faith, politics, human struggle, all the complexities. And that tension between what's known and what's controlled is right there in the documents.
Every single document, whether it's famous like Henry VIII's letter or something deliberately buried like a denied saint's file, it adds a thread to this incredibly complex, sometimes dark, but always fascinating tapestry of history.
Absolutely. And as more fragments, more of these secrets continue to emerge, whether through formal opening or other means, well, it forces us to reconsider the past.
So the question for you, listening, is maybe, as these layers get peeled back, how does it change our understanding of why historical choices were made? And what does this slow, ongoing revelation mean for how we think about truth itself? Something to ponder.